All right, Eric, got your coffee ready? Glad to see you again. Let's talk about 2 Kings chapter 17, and truly nothing new under the sun.
Well, we have the intro to this, is the lions, tigers, and bears. Did you want to do that?
Let's save that for another one.
Really?
For the doom and gloom.
Well, that's what
Addressing
this
the
is
doom and gloomers.
Okay, well...
This ties in, but
okay,
I think it should be
the
separate.
idea here is like, as well as we mentioned it, in the Wizard of Oz, they're sitting there talking about things to be afraid of. Lions, tigers, and bears. Oh my! Or we could say the Illuminati and the Jesuits and the British and the Americans and the Russians and the Chinese. Oh gosh!
And the chemtrails and the vaccines.
And the bacteria and the GMOs. It's like Monsanto. It's like, okay, who do you love to hate? Let's have a list of potential enemies. Put the IRS right at the top. It's like, oh gosh. Well, there's a very interesting verse here. 2 Kings 17, verse, and this is in Stone's Tanakh, it says, verse 39, rather you shall fear Yahweh your Elohim, and he will save you from the hand of your enemies. What enemies? Lions, tigers, and bears, or any of these other ones we just went through the list of? Rather what? Well, this entire chapter goes all the way back 2,700 and about 40 years now.
Oh.
This is 2020. So as of 2010, it was the end of the 2,730-year curse, because back in 721 BC, Assyria took over the northern kingdom of Israel. And this chapter,
Yeah, no kidding.
2 Kings 17, is that account in the chronological history. So it doesn't elaborate very much, but it starts off in the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah. Hoshea, son of Elah, became king over Israel in Samaria and reigned for 9 years. So it's just a matter of history. But it talks about Assyria coming in and taking over the northern kingdom, taking everybody into captivity, killing people, and then that's it. They've never been heard of since. All these years, the scattered, lost 10 tribes of the northern kingdom are gone to this day. Why? Well, it tells us why. There's a little list here. In 2 Kings 17, Yahweh has a list of what the people did and what the people did not do. It said they feared Elohim Achrim. That's translated as gods of others or other gods. They walked into the decrees of the nations. And that word decree is bet het kuf, which is also the word chok, which is typically translated commandment, which also means to imitate. In other words, it's translated, they walked in the decrees of the nations, but it actually could be better translated, they imitated the way the other nations had their customs. That same word for walk is the same word for custom. Imputed things that were not so to Yahweh. What does that mean? The Israelites imputed things that were not so to Yahweh. Well, how do we know what is so and what is not so? We've got to regard his word, and it'll tell us. They built high places. They put up pillars and Asherah trees on every hill and under every leafy tree. Interesting thing. Fleetwood Mac had a song that was pretty popular way back when. Stevie Nicks put it out called Rhiannon. Well, Rhiannon is the name of a famous Welsh witch. But that word Rhiannon actually comes from the Hebrew word for leafy tree. So they got in trouble for lighting incense and practicing witchcraft under leafy trees. Now, there's nothing wrong with saying a prayer sitting under a leafy tree. Trees aren't in leaf, it's the middle of winter here. But there's nothing wrong with sitting under a leafy tree. But to go to those places and specifically conduct incantations, lighting incense is what he said, going on to high hills and putting up pillars, it's like, what are they doing? Well, Yahweh didn't tell us to do that. It didn't say you can't go up on the mountaintop and pray or sing a song. So what's the problem? That's the question. What's the problem? They burned incense and had idols. They forsook the mishpat. They forsook the mitzvot. Mem Zadi Vav Tav. That's the instruction specifically given. Interesting thing about the word mitzvot, or it's the same root as the word matzah, and it also isn't just talking about the unleavened bread, but it means find out how to do something. The word Zadi Vav is command. Yahweh gives a certain command. Find out what that command is. You know, if we were in a studio, we wouldn't have to put up with this. But we're not in a studio. We're out here
I'm just moving
in
the camera
nature,
a little closer.
and that's just what it is. Sorry about that. There's children playing. This is the Shabbat. There's other people's motor noises going on. There's the dogs barking, and you'll have to just take that as part of the ambiance. Anyway, they did divination and sorcery and did what was evil in Yahweh's eyes. Those are the 8 things that the people of Israel, in 2 Kings 17, verse 7, all the way through verse 16, he talks about that. Well, what were they supposed to be doing? Verse 13, Yahweh had issued warning in Israel and Judah throughout the land of all the prophets of any vision or every vision, saying, here's what we're supposed to be doing. Repent from your evil ways. Observe my commandments and my decrees in accordance with the entire Torah that I commanded your forefathers, that I have sent you through my servants the prophets. But they did not listen. The people of Israel refused to listen to Yahweh. They stiffened their neck, like the neck of their forefathers who did not believe in. Well, they believed in him. What does that mean, they didn't believe? Well, the word believe there is amunah, and it has to do with being faithful, having faith in or being faithful to. They rejected his decrees and his covenant that he had sealed with their forefathers, and his warnings that he had warned about them, and they went after the worthless and became worthless. That which we pursue is what we become. You could say, well, that's just some kind of philosophy, or that's some religion. It's the mechanical way, you might say, the mechanics of this universe, the way that Yahweh set things up. Is that what we put our mind to, and that what we follow and pursue is what we become? There's a famous story about the man in the mountain, or the face in the mountain. I forget what it's called exactly. It's over in New Hampshire, I believe it is. And there's a certain face that they wrote a poem about and done paintings about, and the guy was just contemplating this face in the mountain, and he actually ended up looking like the face in the mountain. Profile of side view. That's just the way things work. Whatever we put our mind to and attach our heart to, we become like it.
Conforming to his image.
So if we pursue Yahweh, then we'll become like him. If we pursue idols, we become as worthless as the idols. As a matter of fact, the word for idol is the same word for, if you were going to whittle, you take a piece of stick and you get shavings. If you take a piece of rock and you chip it to form a shape, you end up with rubble. That same word rubble and chips or shavings is the same word for the idol, meaning it's just worthless refuse. If you pursue the idols that you form by carving or shaping something, you become as worthless as that refuse. Anyway, they forsook the commandments of Yahweh, made molten image, 2 calves, made Asherah trees, prostrated themselves to the hosts of the heavens, and worshipped the Baal. Then, verse 18, Yahweh became very angry with Israel, removed them from his presence. None remained except the tribe of Judah, and even Judah did not observe the commandments of Yahweh their Elohim. They walked in the decrees of Israel. So Yahweh, verse 20, rejected the entire offspring of Israel and oppressed them. Yahweh himself oppressed them. He delivered them into the hands of plunderers, and he cast them away from his presence. For Israel had torn away from the house of David, dropping down to the end of verse 23. So Israel went into exile from their land to Assyria to this day. And it goes on to say how lions were incited against the people that moved in. And then they brought back some of the people from Israel as priests to teach the people what Assyria would do is they would take people from this land and move them to another land, and then take people from that land and move them back into this land, so people were displaced from their home. But because the lions were eating the people, they said, gosh, we don't know how to serve the God of this land. So then you go down to verse 33, and they said, well, when they brought in priests from Israel to say, well, this is the way you're supposed to conduct, so to appease the God of the land, they feared Yahweh, but they worshiped their own gods, according to the practice of the nations from which they'd been exiled. Until this day, they act according to the original practice. They don't fear Yahweh sincerely. They don't act according to the customs and practices, or according to the Torah and the commandments that Yahweh had commanded the children of Jacob, whose name he had changed to Israel. He said, do not fear the gods of others. That's the word Elohim Akrim. Do not fear them. Verse 37, and the decrees and the laws and the Torah and the commandment that he wrote for you, you shall observe to do all the days. All the days. And you shall not fear the gods. Why didn't he say, do the Torah commandment until the Messiah comes? Do the Torah commandments until I do away with it and give you a new covenant. He didn't say that. He told us here, you will regard the decrees, the laws, the Torah, and the commandments. That's actually the words chok, mishpat, Torah, mitzvot. There's 4 different classifications here. Other places there's edot, and there's one other one. There's typically 6 different words that he uses to describe the things we're supposed to observe. And then you get different English words like statutes, commandments, statutes, ordinances, laws, commandments. Anyway, they shuffle them around. I find that it's not consistent translation of words. And the covenant that I sealed with you, you shall not forget. And you shall not fear Elohim Akrim. Rather, you shall fear Yahweh Elohim. He will save you from the hand of your enemies. And here's a very interesting verse. But they did not obey, verse 40. Rather, they act according to the original practice. Okay, so they just do what they... Wait a minute. But this word practice is actually the word mishpat. So they did not listen. Ka mishfatam. The word mishpat there is balanced scales of justice, and it means legal due. It's translated in some verses as practice or manner, but it's legal scales of justice, of balance. Ha-rashon. Well, that's the word first or original, but it also means of antiquity. It also means the most supreme. It's the highest. So what is the highest mishpat? In the Psalms it says that mishpat and tzedakah is the foundation of Yahweh's throne. So here, picture scales of balance, like in America, the Lady Justice, as they say, a woman with a blindfold holding a sword and scales of balance, blind justice. It's like, I'm not going to pay attention to who's doing what, but according to the scales of balance, one is going to win and the other one's going to get the sword. Who's right and who's wrong? What's going on here? So if we translate this, they act according to the original practice. So it's like, oh, okay, that's just a matter of history. And it's like, but look at this verse 40. They're not listening. According to the scales of balance, ha-rashon. Ha-rashon is the highest, the best, the first, the original, the most superior. And then this word ayin shin yod mem is simply translated, they act, they do. That's what they do. But it also means they cause or bring about. Now let's consider a little matter. Scales of balance is a picture of a contract or an arrangement or a relationship between two people or two different groups of people. Yahweh says, according to whatever you do is going to be done to you. Whatever goes around comes around. Whatever you put in your side of the scales of balance is what's going to be delivered back. Blessed are the merciful, they will receive mercy. With the measure you use, it'll be measured to you. This is mishpat. Yahweh says hundreds of times, a man's way is returned upon his own head. So if you have scales of balance between you and another person, it doesn't matter what they say, what they do, what they put in their side of the scales of balance. what are you putting in your side of the scales of balance? Abraham had this little phrase, mishpat, or actually his way of doing mishpat was emet and chesed, truth and kindness. That's what he determined to put in his side of the scales of balance. And when he told Eliezer, his servant, to go find a wife for his son Isaac, and he went and found Rebekah, he says, do mishpat, or do emet and chesed with me. It's like there's this concept of being Yahweh's people, that whatever we put in our side of the scale of balance should be truth and kindness, which is expressed as righteousness, zadikah. If we put only in our sides truth and kindness, that's actually the Rashon Mishpat. That's the highest order of anything you can conduct your way in your life. Truth and kindness. It's the highest order. It's the Rashon. If you put that in your side of the scale of Mishpat, it wins. It's what causes things to happen. And whether the guy on the other side is being devious, or has more money, or has more education, or more influence, or he has more armaments, Yahweh says he will save us from the hand of our enemies. It doesn't matter their wealth, their education, their position, their military, none of that matters. He said, do not fear their power. The Elohim could be considered gods, but it's also the powers of others. It doesn't matter what they say. It doesn't matter how much military budget or how much economic power they have. We are supposed to be listening to Yahweh's instructions, commandments, precepts, ordinances. Find out how to do it. This verse is telling us how to do it, but it's not translated in English in any way that we can give it a regard. This is what I'm trying to bring out. If we think this verse says, oh, they didn't obey, rather they act according to the original practice. It's like, oh, okay. That's just a little snapshot of history. And we go right on. But if we stop and look at this same verse in Hebrew, it says, they're not listening. Who's they? Israel, or even the people that were brought in? It's not about, oh, throw Yahweh some token sacrifices so the lions don't eat your children, which is what these guys were doing. He says, listen to what I said, and if you do what I said, I will save you from the hand of your enemies. That's what this is about. This isn't about, are your sins forgiven by the blood of the Savior so you can go to heaven? That's not what this subject is. What this subject is do what Yahweh said, and he will save us from the hand of our enemies. Period. So why are we always making a big deal about this stuff? These chok, these mishpat, these Torah, these mitzvot, these edot. Why are we going on about this? So that Yahuwah will save us from the hand of our enemies. That's what this is about. This is not about working our way to have salvation, or working our way into heaven, or working. This isn't about working anything. This is about doing what he said because he said so, in the same exact words that stand as the judgment against his people, which brought in the country of Assyria, the people of Assyria, to crush Israel, to destroy them, to eradicate their memory from the face of the earth for 2,740 years now. The same statements. You shouldn't have feared them. You shouldn't have walked in their ways. You shouldn't have followed their customs. Yahweh you should fear and walk in his customs. What are his customs? The seventh-day Sabbath and the 7 Moedim, and doing truth and kindness, which is expressed as righteousness. And that's about it. In all these words, that's about it. Let's just jump ahead real fast. Ezekiel 5. Thus said Yahweh, this is Jerusalem. Among the nations I have placed her, and all around her are countries. She exchanged my laws for wickedness more than the other nations did. and exchanged my decrees more than the countries that are around her, for they spurned my laws and did not follow my decrees. Now those two words for laws and decrees are chok and mishvat. Same two words. Therefore, thus says Yahweh Elohim, because you readied yourselves more than the nations around you, in parentheses for sin, you didn't follow my decrees, you didn't fulfill my laws, you didn't even act according to the laws of the nations around you, I too am against you, I will execute judgments in your midst before the eyes of the nations. It's always the same thing. We should regard the chok, the mishpat, the Torah. It's always the same 6 words that he gets upset with, that his people don't listen to him. The reason we're making these videos, the reason we're looking at this stuff, because if we don't listen, he's going to call in and strengthen the hand of our enemies, which might even be bacteria, viruses, mold, fungus, lions. It's not just the people, but it might include people.
Could a virus be a beast of the field?
Yeah.
You see that mentioned a lot.
One of
Beasts of the field.
Whether they're big, obvious animals, grizzly bears, lions, tigers, and bears. I mean, they've got that up in Montana and Canada. Those are real enemies. I'm not mocking the fact that we have real enemies. I'm saying because we have real enemies, that's why we are trying to be what some people classify as Torah observant or Judaizing or Gnostics or going under the law. It's to be saved from the hand of our enemies. That's all this is about.
I've heard it called doctrine of demons also.
Doctrines of demons.
You can't walk as Messiah walked and disregard Torah. That's the simplicity of it. And we're told to do that. Walk even as he walked. But disregard Torah. Come on now.
How he walked is the Torah. The word Torah, they translate as the word law, but the word or, vav resh, or, is the root of the word for light. Torah is the expressing what it means to walk in the light.
It's funny, the church seems to have disregarded everything that we are told is for our sanctification. You know, not eating the pig, keeping Sabbath, the feast. Those are for sanctification. Oh, we don't want that.
Oh, that's a big word now. What do you mean by sanctification?
Well, set apart for his use.
Well, see, the word
doing
kadosh.
his things.
The word kadosh is translated as holy, sacred, sanctified, set apart. That's all the same word. So to be, he said in Leviticus 19:2, I believe it is, because he is set apart, he's calling us to be set apart. That you could say, he's sacred, so he wants us to be sanctified. It's just English words of the same Hebrew root. The Ruach HaKodesh. The word Kodesh is the same as Kiddush, is the same as Kadosh, just different vowels, just different ways to express the same root word, and it just basically, it's also the same word for betrothed. So people who say, I'm the bride of Christ, or I'm betrothed to, that's the word Kadosh. Kuf Dalet Shin. If you're his people, it means oriented with your focus on him and forsaking all others. That's the word kadosh. To be sanctified is to turn your back on walking in the ways of the nations, walking in the ways of the other people. Yahweh even says all through here that when the iniquity of the people that lived in the land of Canaan, a dozen different people groups, when the cup of their iniquity is full, he told Abraham, you can't go into the land now, I'm not going to give it to you now, it's not yet full. 430 years later, when the cup of the iniquity of the Canaanites was full, Yahweh sent Moshe in and said, they've lost their covering. The land itself is going to vomit them out. And if the people of Israel do those same things, the land will vomit them out. And it said, as we read in Ezekiel 5, they did even worse. The people of Israel did worse than what the Canaanites were doing. And Yahweh has to not play favorites. Blind justice. The sword came upon them because what they put in the scales of balance, going back to this concept, what we put in the scales of balance is not just in our affairs with one another, but it's regarding him and regarding the earth. If we put what he instructed us in our side of the scales of balance, the way we conduct our affairs, the way we walk, we attend to ourselves. And what those people, what the guy on the other side of the scales puts in his side, if a guy's going to make up stories and lie about you in court, if a guy's going to intentionally misunderstand what you're saying, and the guy's going to tell fabricated myths, he's going to get what he's going to get.
Indeed.
I don't have to put my hand toward exacting judgment against another man. I have to make sure what is in my side is truth and kindness and righteousness. And what's evil? The same word resh ayin that's translated evil also means friend and companion. It also means thought, idea, noise, shout. It also means harm, calamity, injury. Why should the same word be all those ideas? Is this chair evil? It's just a chair. Can it be evil? An evil person can make it. I know that some artists and musicians, when they're making things, they project prayer and intent into their piece of art. And you can say, some evil stuff is coming through that. It's a portal. Whatever truth there is to that, the object itself isn't evil, but I know people have realized that they bought a piece of art, they have to get rid of it because it's a portal of demon entry into their lives. But the point is, it's the people's intent that is evil. To intend harm against your fellow, that's what evil is. It's your thoughts of bringing calamity to another person, which is why the word resh ayin, meaning evil, is also harm, calamity, and associate, friend, companion, and thought, and idea, and noise and shout. It's the stuff you do with effort to bring harm to another person is what's evil. And you can certainly use objects, and you can make things like idols or artwork or music which conduct evil, but the evil is what we do, what we intend to one another. When we intend truth and kindness, and there's a genuine disagreement with another person who's also intending truth or kindness, now you've got balancing of scales. And if you take a matter to court, you've got common law, which is just, you might say, well, what makes sense? And you can deal with that with one another. And then you have commercial courts, and you have admiralty courts, and you have maritime law, and then you can take things to a federal case. But to take something to the highest court is to appeal to heaven and to appeal to Yahweh and say, Yahweh, please bring mishpat in this situation I have with my fellow, whether it's my brother or whether it's the guy I'm in contract with, or whether it's just some guy who's being a jerk. It's like when you appeal to heaven, it's like when Paul, the Apostle Paul, otherwise known as Shaul, was arrested, and he says, hey, I'm a Roman citizen, I appeal to Caesar. And it's like the magistrate that was over him said, man, you're completely innocent. I could have absolved you, but because you appealed to heaven, or because you appealed to Caesar, I got to send you to Rome. Okay, when you appeal to heaven, it's the highest court. And you better make sure that you've got truth and kindness on your side of those scales. Because when the foundation of Yahweh's throne is mishpat, talk about blind justice. It doesn't matter whether you're the people of Israel. It doesn't matter whether this is the city of Jerusalem. Anything that we're doing wrong is going to come back and get us, is going to bite us. It's going to hit us with that double-edged sword. It's like, whoa, gosh, this is nothing to mess with. But if we want to be saved from the hand of our enemies, we better learn the way his kingdom works. And his kingdom works that a man's way is brought up back upon his own head. And Yahweh said, good measure pressed down, shaken together, and overflowing. One seed brings forth a yield, 30, 60, 100-fold. If we put in righteousness, we will get an abounding harvest of righteousness. If we put in villainy, we're going to get it. It's coming back. In civil courts, they used to give 39 lashes, and then they would put you in the dungeon and feed you bread and water, and bugs and rats is what you had for dinner. But when Yahweh brings your own way back on your own head, 30, 60, 100-fold. You got nobody to blame but yourself. You better watch what you do. You better watch what you say. You better watch your heart intent, because Yahweh's throne. And when we say, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, it's mishpat. Mem, Shin, Pei, Tet. That's what his kingdom is all about. And we can sit here and clamor and pray and make a noise about, oh, when's the kingdom going to come? When's the kingdom going to come? When his kingdom comes, your ways are coming back on your own head. And we have right now to make sure that our heart's pure and that we're doing truth and kindness. And when his kingdom shows up, he's going to save us from the hand of our enemies, which means we don't have to wait for the rapture. We don't have to wait until one of these days when the millennial kingdom shows up. We don't have to wait until one of these days when Yeshua comes back. It's present tense. Right now, his kingdom come, do zadikah, righteousness, emet and chesed, truth and kindness, on our sides of the scales of balance.
And we can never bottom out those scales.
It's what causes
That's right.
the scales to tip, as it says right here in the verse 40 of 2 Kings 17. It's the mishpat rashon, the highest order of judgment, and when we do it, ashim, it causes it to happen, because it's the highest order. Nothing can trump it. When you're playing cards, if you don't know how to play cards and somebody says, well, here, let me deal out some cards. Look, I have 2 of those and 3 of those. Okay, look at, those are all 4 in the same numerical sequence. Well, which one is the higher order? Well, this one beats that one. Oh, okay, so what does that mean? Well, that means you win the hand of cards. But if you don't know the rules, you don't know the rules. How do you know what the rules are? He's telling us what the rules are. Emet and chesed win the hand every time. It's the mishpat rashon. But you can't read it in the English translations. That's the benefit of reading in Hebrew. So we understand how they get in trouble before. They walked in the decrees of the nations, whom Yahweh had driven out from before the children of Israel, and that the kings of Israel had enacted. And the children of Israel imputed things that were not so to Yahweh their Elohim. And they built themselves high places in all their cities. So let's not do that. That's why we keep the Sabbath day and the Moedim, the festivals. Because that's what he said. And he never retracted any of this.
No.
So we act like fanatics, obsessive, compulsive, maniacs. Learning Hebrew, reading this stuff, why? Because he said so.
It's good enough for me.
Even so, Yahweh, bring mishpat and show us how to put emet and chesed in our side.
Hallelujah. Well, let's get a bite to eat and make some more videos.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.